Very good morning and a warm welcome to all our dear student friends. We, the teaching fraternity, hope that you all are safe and sound at home during this pandemic crisis. I welcome you all for this online revision series organized for TYBA students of English department by BNN College, Bhiwandi. Let me brief you about me. I am Dr. Sangeeta Kongre, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Maharshi Dayananda College, Arts, Science and Commerce, Mumbai. At the outset, let me first express my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Sudhir Nikam sir, Head of the Department, BNN College, Bhiwandi, Chairperson, Board of Studies, University of Mumbai. I also wish to thank Shri Vijay Jadhav sir, Honorable President, Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav, Bharatiya Samaj Unnati Mandal. I also wish to express my heartfelt gratitude to Shri Balakrishna Kale sir, Honorable Executive President, Padma Shri Anna Sahib Jadhav Bharatiya Unnati Mandal, and Dr. Ashok Wagh sir, Principal, BNN College. I also thank Nikam sir's department colleague, Ms. Namrata Jadhav, for her continuous help and support as and when needed. Thank you. Now, dear student friends, let me make an attempt to revise your TYPA Semester 6, Paper 5, Literary Criticism. So, friends, here is my email ID. You can contact me through email if you have any doubt, queries, or issues related to this paper. So let me promise that I will keep the time limitation of 40 to 45 minutes to revise this entire paper. So friends, this paper is unlike other papers where you can write summary or analysis in your own words of literary text. But here in literary criticism, you have to deal with the literary language, as literary criticism is a critic of literary text. Most of the time, students say and students feel that this paper is relatively difficult. But let me assure you, dear students, if you understand basic concepts of literary criticism, that is movements, approaches, you will be able to write or you will be able to score high in your exams. So friends, I hope my attempt to revise this particular paper will definitely help you to enhance your understanding of literary criticism paper, and you will be able to score high in this paper. So your paper 5, literary criticism, has 4 units. This is what is okay. Let me move towards to the first slide. Unit 1. Paper 5 has 4 units. Unit 1 is literary movements. Unit 2 and 3 are critical approaches, and then your unit 4 is practical criticism, wherein you have to appreciate a given poem or a prescribed poem, right? Okay. So unit 1, literary movements. There are few concepts or movements which you have to understand. Very first is classicism. What is classicism? Classicism is a writing written during the Renaissance period, especially from Homer to Juvenal. Okay? And it designates these writers' work as excellent literature as they cross the time criteria. Now, this classicism has become a synonym for excellence itself. Okay? um, this literary movements classes as critics, they refer to artistic and aesthetic tenets drawn from the Greek and Roman literature. Gradually, during 18th century, however, the term focused on the qualities such as unity, proportion, dominance of reasoning over spontaneity, and they were focusing more on clarity, balance, form of poetry or a literary work. Right? Then this classicism period revived Augustan classical literary writings, which were encouraged, and such literature was termed as classical literature or classicism. We have neoclassical critic Dr. Johnson, who defines classicism as The art of uniting pleasure with truth by calling imagination to the help of reason. This is what is the definition given by Dr. Johnson. So classicism focuses more on reasoning, order, okay, structure, close, neat structure of a literary work. I hope you understand this concept called classicism. Now let's move towards to the next literary movement, that is Romanticism. Okay. So Romanticism emerged as a literary movement in between the late 18th century and early 19th century in England. It was contemporary to American literature also. It also applies to literary movement in other European countries, especially in America. Okay. So friends, please try and understand one important fact, that any ism, any approach, any trend, fashion, okay, is a reaction or an extension of the previous one. Okay. So Romanticism was a reaction. It was opposing. It denounced the neoclassical movement in literature. What are the tenets or principles of neoclassical criticism? As these romantic writers tried to oppose it. Okay, so we will see them in. Now, in romanticism, in this literary movement, we have romantic poets. Especially this period was more popular for poetry as a form and as well as novel as a form, right? So now we will see there are, we usually call senior romantic poets, junior romantic poets. Among them, William Wordsworth and S.T. Coleridge. They wrote one particular book, which is a manifesto of romanticism, and the name or the title of that book is Lyrical Ballad. It is a foundation of that particular movement. Okay. In this book, they denounce upper subjects and poetic diction of following strict rules and regulations while writing a particular form of literature. So, but at times what happens when we talk about romantic writers or poets, we think them from the perspective of as though only they are nature poets, but it is not so. William Wordsworth says they try to portray other writers, poets of this particular literary movement who belong to this romanticism. They try to project mind of the man, which focuses on freedom of innovation. They were more focused, or they were advocating liberalism, expressionism of individualism. They rejected the adherence to rules and regulations, which was basic principle of neoclassical movement. They focused more on sentiments rather than structure or form of poetry, like close couplet. They used blank verse, unrhymed verse. It replaced close couplets. So they believe, or they focused more on spontaneity. As you all must be aware, Wordsworth's definition of poetry, it's a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Okay, so spontaneity and naturalness were the main subjects or theme of their writings. They focused more on external nature, that is environment. They tried to revive a part of Elizabethan poetry when they were writing about it. Now, I have given a list of a few poets and writers to give a passing reference to them if the question comes. So, who are the poets in those in Romanticism? These are the important poets: Robert Burns, Blake, Byron, Shelley, Keats, Wordsworth, Coleridge, which we have already seen. Now, prose writers, you have Lamb, Harriet, Mary Wollstonecraft, Hunt, novelist Jane Austen, Sir Walter, and many more are there. Okay? So, next concept is realism. What does it mean by realism? How it emerged? Okay, we will see it. The critics applied the term in two diverse ways. Very first one is they gave this name of realistic writing to the novels written during 19th century, and the second use of this realism was it designated a recurrent mode of representation of real human life. I hope you understand the concept real human life, basic reality, okay, and common and experience in literature. Realistic fiction opposed the romantic fiction. You all know romanticism. We have just gone through our slides. Romantic or romanticism opposed neoclassical tenets, whereas realism gives a reaction to the romantic fiction. Okay. What they believe, they project real life as commoners perceive it from the perspective of common human beings, commoners. Okay. And so they believe that reader must believe the story. Reader must have a make belief on that particular literary work. It should not be supernatural or fictional to them. That was their basic tenet or basic principle while writing any literature. So realists prefer commonplace and everyday minute details. To give the effect of real life, what they did? These writers represented complex characters with mixed motives. Okay, so the novel concentrates. If you see a realistic novel, it concentrates on customs, conversations, ways of thinking of middle class family or society, values of a particular class, basic day-to-day life events. They focused more. Okay? And in America, the realistic period lasted in between 19th century itself, that is from 1865 to 1900. Okay? And you have to, when you will write on this realism, you have to give a passing reference to some realistic novels. See, when I say passing reference, that means you are giving an impression to the paper assessor that you have read a particular text, and where you are giving where you are applying this particular ism or particular literary movement. This thing you have to understand first, right? Now, the next concept we will see naturalism. Okay, so naturalism is an offshoot. It is an extension, friends. See, we have seen romanticism, which was a reaction or opposition to neoclassicism. Later on, realism. Realism was a reaction to romanticism. And now this is naturalism. Please try to understand reaction and extension. Okay. So naturalism is an offshoot. It is an extension of the previous one. Okay. So it emerged in 19th century. What these naturalist writers are trying to say, their basic principles draw from Émile Zola. Émile Zola is a French novelist. Her particular text, the experimental novel, is a basic manifesto for naturalism. Now, naturalist writers believe that life we have to present more accurately than realism. They were of this view that what realistic writers are presenting is not an accurate real projection of human beings life. This was what they were believing. Okay, now basically naturalism is a mode of fiction which follows the assumption that human being exist entirely in the order of nature. Human beings feel that we are controlling our lives, but naturally say that is not you who is controlling your life. It is environment and hereditary which control your life. This is what is naturalist belief. Okay, but simultaneously they rejected sentimentalism, spiritualism, and supernaturalism. They believe in the force of nature. That is why you find naturalistic writing. If you see a particular novel, you will find the mostly the end of that particular novel where it's a tragic one, where a protagonist suffers. He or she becomes a victim of his or her greed and desire. Okay. So next concept is symbolism. Symbolism in literal sense means an object or event which in turn signifies something or it has a range of references. Okay. So symbols, we have lot many symbols through which we could understand more than what symbol represents, right? So poets in romantic period persistently, that is continuously used recurring symbols. Okay. So, for example, if you read P.B. Shelley's poetry, you will find There are a number of symbols which occur regularly in his poems. For example, morning and evening stars, winding caves, conflict between serpent and eagle, etc. Okay, and symbolism, if we try to define, it is a coherent system composed of a number of symbolic elements. Okay, so who were the writers who were writing under this term symbolism in America? we have we have Hawthorne, Melville, Emerson, Thoreau. These are the prominent writers who were writing under this particular term. Okay? And French symbolists have a greater impact on these symbolist writers. They tried to create and enhance the richness or suggestiveness in their writings. Okay? The modern period writers, okay, we have from E. E. Cummings, W. Yeats, T.S. Eliot, many of them. Okay, so these modern writers used symbols subtly, minutely, to show the impact. Okay, how the World War first has affected us through symbols. Right. So again, you need to give a passing reference to poets or writers whom you know. So we have Yeats, Ellis Round, as I told you, Dylan Thomas, E. Cummings, Wallace Stevens, Eliot, who has used beautiful, complex, difficult symbols in his wasteland. Okay, now move towards to the aestheticism. This is, I guess, last concept of this particular unit one. So, what is an aestheticism? Aestheticism believes that beauty is a basic standard of value of human life. Okay, mostly they draw their principles or tenets from a German philosopher Immanuel Kant. They believe that this great literature possesses beauty of arts and literature. Okay? Movement, this is the movement which was initiated in France during later 19th century. It emerged as an opposition, okay? It emerged as a reaction to the middle class society's thinking that any art which does not teach, which does not have, which does not possess moral values is not useful. They try to reject, they try to delete this particular belief of commoners. They assume that a work of art is the supreme value among human products. The work of art is in itself sufficient, self-independent entity. They focused on the significance of art for art's sake. Look at the art only from art's point of view. You need not to attach the connotative meanings from social, historical, cultural point of view. That was what they were advocating. They also advocated that literature lies in beauty of its form. Okay. Now, we have this Walter Pater who says the love of art for its own sake. Okay, so aestheticism, William Pater, you have many more writers and critics to deal with. You have to give the passing reference to them. Now, friends, let us move towards to our unit 2, critical approaches. Okay, so critical approach is a point of view, is a perspective. Okay, so a particular text, in order to have a better understanding and being students of literature and literary criticism, one has to focus, one has to try to find, one should try to find out the more or better understanding or interpretation of that particular text while applying these theories, approaches, that is point of view, your perspective. Okay, so very first critical approach is new criticism. Unit 2, the first one is new criticism. So in this new criticism, the term came into existence with Ransom's publication of the new criticism. Friends, whenever you will try to write the title of the book or name of a particular critic, you must be taking precautions that you spell them well, you write it properly. Okay. So the new criticism was an important or significant book which has given a good contribution to this particular approach. It opposes the contemporary scholars who were advocating, who were supporting that history, culture, and social context of a text is more important than the text itself. Okay. Now, These new critics, they borrow their principles from these two important critics, that is I.A. Richards and T.S. Eliot. I.A. Richards, these two books, Principles of Literary Criticism, and the other book, Practical Criticism, and Critical Essays of Eliot. These are important source for new critics criticism. New critics believe the proper concern of literary criticism should be a detailed consideration of the work itself as a self-independent entity. Okay? They believe that literature should be read or should be analyzed from literature's point of view. One should see within the text itself. For better understanding, one need not to go beyond the text. What are their assumptions? Before that, we will see the writers. We will see the critics. Who are the critics? Main critics of this particular ism or approach? We have Cleon Brooks, Penn Warren Buffet, Ransom, Alan Tate, Blackmore, and Wimsatt. Okay. Among them, F.R. Lewis is one of the important critics who has turned his attention to the literary analysis of literary text themselves. He focused on analyzing a text from its own perspective. Okay. He believes that a particular literary text, or rather, new critical critics focused more on poetry as a form. So he says a poem should be treated primarily as poetry or as a poem and not another thing. Okay, because they all believe that literature is an independent and self-sufficient. Okay. They also believe that literature is made up of special kind of language, and hence they demanded close reading of that particular text. And they feel that there is hardly any significant difference between genre or among genre, as any literary work, whatever form it has been written by writer or poet, it uses a special kind of language. Now, let's move on to structuralism. Before that, in new criticism, you have to mention one or the other poem wherein you will find that you can apply new criticism. You need to give just a passing reference. Okay, this is critical uh, criticism, literary criticism paper. But while understanding the criticism, you have to try to apply the theories or principles to literary text also. So at least even a passing reference would do. Now let us move towards to the next approach, that is structuralism. Structuralism is a practice of critics who analyze literature on the explicit model of structuralist linguistics, and they borrow from Saussure. Saussure's book, Course in General Linguistics, is an important book for structuralism. Now, this is a this literary movement or this literary approach, critical approach, is a part of French structuralism, which was launched by the anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss, and it opposes structuralism opposes the traditional disciplinary areas like humanities and social sciences. It focuses on the objective account of all socio-cultural practices. Critics believe that such practices are combinations of science that have predetermined set significance for people of a particular culture. I hope you understand this one. I repeat, critics believe, that is, structuralist critics believe that such socio-cultural practices are combinations of science that have a predetermined set significance. Okay, for people of a particular culture. They view that any cultural phenomena is not an objective fact, identifiable by their inherent properties, but they have meaning in relations. Okay, any individual culture or language, it doesn't have, or any cultural phenomena does not have its own identifiable fact, but it is relational. Okay, human beings are unaware of its functioning, but naturally, automatically, unknowingly, we acquire those codes. Okay. Critics, these structuralist critics, are more interested into Lang rather than Parole. Okay. What does it mean? Lang is what? Lang forms structure, features of a particular language. Now, it views literature as a second order signifying system, whereas we chooses, okay, this second order signifying system, which is comprised in literature, it is based on the first order structural system of language. Structuralism analyzes literature on the basis of linguistic theory. Okay. And it aims to construct a poetics which stands to literature as linguistics stands to language. This is the definition given by Jonathan Guller. Okay, and structuralism opposes to these theories: mimetic, expressive, traditional humanistic theories, or criticism. It believes in creating self, the product of working of the linguistic system. The self uses conventions. The self, I mean creative self of a writer, of an author, okay? He or she uses conventions, codes, and rules of combinations which are already in existence, which are always already exist in the system of the language. And hence Roland Barthes declares, reader, okay, sorry, hence Roland Barthes declare that as an institution the author is dead. I hope you all must read the text or the essay, the essay by Roland Barthes, The Author is Dead, where he annihilates the author as an agency, okay, and he believes that they replace the author by the reader as a central agency in criticism. They believe on reader response theory. Okay. Next is psychoanalytic criticism. Friends, psychoanalytic criticism, please let me remind you again, all these approaches, all these critical approaches they require uh, depth and a lot of time to explain. But now since it is a revision lecture, I'm just giving you in a nutshell. Of course, it is not going to be a complete or thorough or perfect lecture, but yes, it will definitely help you, my dear student friends. Okay. So let us move towards to psychoanalytic criticism. Psychoanalytic criticism deals with basically it looks at literature as an expression of the state of mind and structure of personality of the author. That means they believe psychoanalytical critics believe that author is important here. Okay, they believe that what particular writer writes, it comes from his own um, understanding, perception of life. Okay, psychoanalytical criticism emerged as a theory and practice during the 19th century. It believes three important tenets. What are those three important tenets? When they study literature, they believe that a work of literature is correlated to the author's personality, literary work, that is, in order to analyze author's personality, one has to analyze literary work created by that particular author, and the mode of literary work, that is a particular form, characters. Okay, so these important facts they analyze, they look into, their concern for these three important facts when they analyze a particular literary text. So you can say that it goes against structuralism. Okay, it is a kind of an opposition to structuralism. Structuralism believes on Lang, structure, okay, basic science, course, okay. But here psychoanalytical critics are advocating that writer and author is important, okay. So psychoanalytic and psychological, what's the difference between this? There is no watertight compartment in these two terms, psychological or psychoanalytical, because psychoanalytical criticism is a form of, okay, it is a kind of an extension of psychological criticism. Sigmund Freud is an important name in this particular criticism. It is Sigmund Freud who is the founder member of this ism or criticism. He established its theory and practice. He believes psychoanalysis is a dynamic form of psychology. Okay, it's a dynamic form of psychology. It is mean for analyzing therapy and a therapy for neurosis. Okay. Freud views psychoanalysis is accountable for many developments and practices in the history of civilization. Freud's work, Introduction to Psychoanalysis. I'm just referring this, but you have to mention it in detail, at least 4 or 5 lines about this particular work by Freud. Okay. Then we have classical psychoanalytical criticism, which we will not discuss here in detail. So, what Freud believes? He believes that literature and other arts are like dreams. Now, you as a student of literary criticism, you must think twice what to which concepts one has to accept and one as an individual. Okay, I'm saying one as an individual to accept or whether to have interrogation with these theories. Now here Freud says here Freud says literature is like dream. He equals creative writing with dream. What he says? He says that literature and other arts are like dreams which consist of the imagined desires which are either denied by reality or are prohibited by the social standards. These unfulfilled desires are repressed in the unconscious realm of the artist's mind by the censor, but are permitted in the creative work, at least in a distorted forms. So, what Freud is trying to say here, he equals dream with literary work or a creative work. He says dream is an innate desire which one cannot fulfill because of the pressure or the control of censor, because of the society doesn't allow to those innate feelings of one particular. And what how we can give an outlet to those suppressed emotions, and particularly he says these suppressed innate emotions he relates to libido. Okay, so one has to give an outlet to these uh, uh, repressed strong desires, otherwise one will go mad. So one dreams of fulfilling that particular desire. Okay, and this particular process he compares with a creative writing. He says an author who wants to talk about a particular issue or topic and he is not allowed to do so. So at least in a distorted form he creates that writing. He creates it in the form of writing. So to what extent we should accept this dreams equals to creative writing, that is another debatable question. So you have to focus on this particular point. And then there are very important terms he is using in psychoanalytical criticism. Those are condensation, displacement, and symbolism. Okay? Id, ego, and superego. All these concepts in this criticism you have to mention in detail if the question comes for long answer for 20 marks question, right? Now we have another critic who is important name in this psychoanalytical criticism, that is Ernest Jones. Please, if you get time during this pandemic, as we all are at home, read Ernest Jones' Hamlet and Oedipus, where he discusses the conflict in the mind of Hamlet to kill his whether to kill his uncle or not. That Oedipus complex, he talks about it in detail and he uses psychoanalytical theory here. Okay. So next one is archetypal criticism. Of course, in psychoanalytical criticism, we have a lot of writers who are talking about it. And friends, let me remind you, in all criticism, you all have to mention at least a text passing reference. For example, when you will write about, let us say, uh, the psychoanalytical criticism, at least passing reference or 4 5 lines of para, you have to mention about a literary work. For example, for this particular psychoanalytical criticism, you can discuss, you can write on, let us say, D.H. Lawrence's Sons and Lovers or Rainbow, where he uses one has to have, if you want to have a better understanding of that particular text, you must have the knowledge of psychological and psychoanalytical criticism. Of course, that does not mean that you won't be able to get the meaning or understanding of that text. It is not so. But for better interpretation, better understanding, you need to have the knowledge of psychoanalytical criticism. Right? Now, next we will move towards to archetypal criticism. So, what is an archetypal criticism? Just a sec. So you can read. So, archetypal criticism denotes recurrent narratives, patterns of action, themes, character types, and images in a wide variety of literature as well as in myths, dreams, and even social rituals. Archetypes are recurrent, they occur every now and then. So, these recurrent items are universal patterns formed in human psyche. The depiction of such recurrent universal patterns in literature evokes the same profound response from readers too, as they get shared by both, that is, the writer and the readers. Okay. So, The Golden Bough by James G. Fraser is an important book here. Friends, in every criticism, I am giving one or two important books which you have to refer when you will write an answer. Okay. So, what Fraser does? Fraser identifies certain myths and rituals. They recur in the history and cultures of diverse and far-flung religions and cultures. He believed that a particular myth or ritual in a different forms, but of course that is always there with all sorts of religions and cultures. So very important is it is the death rebirth theme is an archetype of archetypes. They consider it as archetype of archetypes, right? There are few other archetypes are like underground journey in the search of the father, the scapegoat, the earth goddess, the fatal woman. These are the various archetypes they use. Okay, so who are the notable critics in this archetypal criticism? Very important name, Carl Jung. Okay, his concept of archetypes. This is a very broad topic. One has to focus more on this, but due to time limitation, I'm just giving a reference to them. What he believes, he says archetypes are synonymous like primordial images, psychic residue, which survive in collective unconscious of humanity, and it gets expressed in myths, religion, dreams, and literature. Okay, so we have these important critics here: Maud Watkin, Wilson Knight, Graves, Chase, Campbell, and very important again, Northrop Frye. Okay, now next move towards to your unit 3, Marxist approach. Marxist approach, it is very important approach here. It is based on Karl Marx economic and cultural theory. Okay, so what are the assumptions of Marxist critics? Very first assumption: the evolving history of humanity, that is its social groupings, institutions, various religious cultural institutions, and its way of thinking are determined by changing mode of its material production, that is the powerful economic class. Okay, so in short, in nutshell, what it says, that the history of humanity is determined by the powerful class which has the control of material productions. Okay, and so the second assumption is subsequent changes in the material production, in the mode of material production, it creates a class structure. So, for example, in one particular era, one particular class has the control of mode of production, okay, material production, and it goes to the second group. So it creates a conflict between these two. So there are only two classes exist as the Marxist perspective. That is one, bourgeois class, and the other one is proletariat class. Bourgeois, capitalist class, rich class, or powerful class, and proletariat is labor, or let us say powerless class. Okay, and these two classes are always engaged in a struggle for power. This is what is main assumption. You have to mention these assumptions if Marxist approach comes in your paper, comes in your question paper, right? So Marx believe, and Marxist critics too, they believe that ideology, this though ideology in today's contemporary world we are using in all sectors, all fields, like a political party's ideology, Like you all young generation have different ideology, teachers ideology, and there are many in many women's ideologies. We always say like, so ideology is being used in various different fields, but here Marx critics say ideology gets constituted by I'm so sorry, ideology constitutes human consciousness. It is not human beings who constitute ideology. No, it is ideology which constitutes human consciousness. So Marx represents it is in an architectural metaphor. What he says, ideology is the superstructure. Dear student friends, you have to mention this. Okay, he says ideology is the superstructure, which is a visible part to all of us, whereas socio-economic system is the main base of this superstructure called ideology. Just a second. Yes. So this is the statement by Karl Marx. He says it's not the consciousness of men that determines their being, but on the contrary, their social being that determines their consciousness. So it is our social being which determines our living. Okay. For example, you as student, me as teacher, how we behave, we feel that we control our lives, but it is not so. Our social beings, okay, me as a teacher, that social being enforces me the way I behave. So I hope you understand the pun of this particular sentence. You must mention this one. Okay. Let us move ahead. Another Marxist critic, Friedrich Engels, he says ideology. He calls it as a false consciousness. Okay, and then this is running ideology. This is what is Marxist belief, and I feel as an individual that to some extent it is true. Reigning ideology incorporates the interests of bourgeois as opposed to proletariat class. I already discussed about bourgeois and proletariat class. Okay. So now we will apply this Marxist approach to literature. How they perceive literature? What are their views about literature? Literature of any era is a product of the economic and ideological determinants specific to that particular era. That's what they believe. They say it's a product of socio-economic system of that particular society. They hardly accept that literature as a work created in accordance with timeless artistic criteria. They say no, it was that particular text is born and brought up in that particular time. So they focused on that, and they say it is hardly they believe that it is a timeless artistic criteria. They don't accept that one. And there but however there are some Marxists who view it differently. They say yes, to some extent traditional writing, I repeat, they believe that traditional literary works do have a kind of or a degree of autonomy. They possess a degree of autonomy. One of them is George Lukács. He believes that each great work of literature creates its own unique, independent world, which is unique from everyday reality. However, he opposes modernist experimental writers, saying he calls them decadent because he thinks that they focus on an alienated individual in the fragmented world. But to this particular view of George Lukács, there is an opposition from Marxist critics themselves. There is a school called the Frankfurt School of German Marxists. They lauded the modernist writers like James Joyce, Proust, Beckett, Samuel Beckett, as they reflect. They view that these are the writers who reflect an implicit critique of of today's fragmented real world. This is what is Frankfurt School of Marxists believe. Althusser, Louis Althusser is another important name who modifies the concept of ideology, asserting literature is not a mere product of ideology as its fiction creates a distance for readers and hence it exposes the ideology in which it was born. The text detaches itself in an artistic creation. Okay. There is another critic, Pierre Maturin, claims literature exposes contradictions, inherent ideology by its silences and gaps. He asserts Marxist approach to literature must aim to make these silences speak and ultimately expose and oppose the repressing ideology. Antonio Gramsci's recurrent or echoed concept is hegemony. Hegemony is an important concept in this particular criticism, wherein he defines hegemony as a bourgeois ideology which achieves a dominant influence and power by making its ideology so pervasive that the subordinate classes naturally accept and participate in their own oppression. So you have to, on the basis of these tenets and important names of these critics, you have to apply this to a particular text and show there that how this criticism helps to have a better understanding of that literary work. Okay. Now let us move towards to the next criticism, that is feminist criticism. Friends, feminist approach to literature was launched almost very late in 1960s. Of course, it has a two-century struggle of women for recognizing their own socio-cultural roles and achievements in society. Who were the predecessors? We will see. So these are the few important names who were the predecessors for this women's movement called feminism. Okay. For example, Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women. Sorry, Vindication of the Rights of Women. The Subjection of Women by J.S. Mills. Margaret Fuller's Woman in the 19th Century. And most influential, Virginia Woolf's essay, in addition to her text, that is fiction. She has written this wonderful essay, A Room of One's Own. In this particular essay, she asserts that women are prohibited in actualizing their abilities for creative things within this particular patriarchal system. Okay? And she believes that the dominance of patriarchy prevents women from realizing their productive and cultural potentials. So, who are the prominent critics in this particular theory? We have first Simone de Beauvoir, and all of us know the second sex. Okay, beautiful and wonderful critic of writings, men writings. Okay, what she says in this, it's a strong critic of women's cultural identification. Okay, she opposes women image or women projection merely as negative object or other, quote unquote, to man as a subject, quote unquote, representing humanity in general. Man or he represents humanity in general, whereas women are considered only mere negative object or other. Then we have Mary Ellman, American critic. She's in her thinking about women, she portrays the derogatory stereotypes of women in literature written by men. And this particular essay gave quite good impetus to other researchers to dig out the kind of negative images of women in contemporary and traditional literature. Then we have Kate Millett. Kate Millett's sexual politics signifies the mechanism to oppress women. She advocates Western social arrangement is made in such a way that it manipulates the power and it establishes and perpetuates men's dominance over women. Then we have, then again, Millett attacks the writers. She rejects the writings or she opposes the writings of Lawrence, Miller, Jennett for depicting women as other, negative, passive, submissive, sexual objects. Then we have Helen Sizu, Julia Kristeva, and many more. What are their assumptions? Very first assumption of feminist criticism is that it is, of course, before that we will see it is very difficult to define feminism as there are many views and beliefs at times contrast to each other also. For example, there are feminist critics who lauded Shakespeare's writing that he has balanced both in tragedies and comedies. Women are his protagonist in comedies, but there are some women who are against of. There are some women critics or feminist critics rather. They oppose Shakespeare for showing mere women as mere negative images. Okay, so there is no feminism but feminisms. However, they all share certain assumptions. So, which are those assumptions? Very first assumption is they believe that the European civilization, rather the whole civilization, is predominantly patriarchal. It is male centered and it dominates women in all socio-cultural aspects of life. It may be a familial aspect, maybe it is a religious field, socio-economic, cultural, legal, and artistic. So they say that human civilization is pervasively is patriarchal. Okay. Next assumption is they believe the traditional classic literature from Greek philosophy and Hebrew Bible till the present era, they show women or they define women as other, non-man, negative because of the only lacking identifying male organ. That is what is these feminist critics are um, uh, uh, trying to show in their writings. Sorry. Then we have third assumption that women themselves, they believe and they accept this fact that women themselves are taught to internalize the reigning patriarchal ideology. Again, ideology. Okay. Feminist criticism is an interdisciplinary one. It borrows from all critical, contemporary critical approaches. Okay. So they say that women themselves are taught to internalize their own the reigning patriarchal ideology or system under the process of being civilized. Okay. So next is we have the next assumption is gender. You know, sex is determined by biological aspect, but gender is a cultural construct. That's what they are trying to say. Me as a woman, as a gender, is being determined by the society. Okay, so Simone de Beauvoir says in this very relevant quotation she has here. I quote: "One is not born, but other. Sorry, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. It is civilization as a whole that produces this creature." Okay, which is described as feminine. Unquote. Friends, you all have to mention these critics and their writings in your answer when we'll answer this question. So the classical next assumption is the classical great literature, which is included in literary canon that pervades the patriarchal ideology. Okay. So what are the objectives? How what they intend or what are their aims in this? They want to reconstitute the way to deal with literature to justify female perspective by altering the ways a woman reads a text. They focus on the resisting reader to distort these stereotypes, images of women in the literary canon. And their second aim is of gynocriticism. Okay, what is this gynocriticism? It aims at developing a specifically female framework for dealing with works written by women. Hence, it focuses on identifying the feminine subject matter in literature, to uncover a female tradition in literary history, and to show the distinctive feminine mode of experience. Ellen Showalter is of a she has a great contribution in this. She defines three important phases in this Marxist criticism. I want you all to go through Ellen Showalter's work also. Now, friends, the last third assumption is to enlarge, reorder, and ultimately replace the literary canon. These are the aims of feminist criticism. Here you can refer to the text like The Tenant of the Wakefield Hall or Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Any text which Candida, even you can mention Henrik Ibsen's Doll's House. there could be many more writings where you can show the feminist approach, okay, where you can apply feminist approach. So now next move towards to the second last post-colonial criticism. So post-colonial criticism, the term etymologically refers to the period after colonialism. Okay, it is a critic of colonial discourse writing. It focuses on the influence and inheritance of European colonialism on the third world countries. Well, it focuses on history, culture, and literature of the third world countries. But uh, at sometimes it concentrates or it encompasses the 18th and 19th century British literature, which reveals the colonial exploitation. So, post-colonial theories deal with the literature written in previously or currently colonized countries, which deal with colonization or colonized people. Post-colonial thinkers are addressing the major important questions like identity, ethnicity, gender, and language, which have been really affected by colonialism. This is very important, where these are the terms you will find in Edward Said's Orientalism. He talks about Occidental, everything that is European, and Oriental, that is third world country related. This is a very important concept which you all have to focus, and you all have to go through it properly in detailed way. We have the assumptions. Let us move quickly. Very first one, post-colonial critics reject the master narrative of Western imperialism. Western imperialism is a particular system which not only marginalizes and dominates the colonial author, but what they do through this Western imperialism, they try to annihilate the later, that is the third world countries or the colonized one, as a cultural agency. Okay. In this regard, this book, The Empire Writes Back, Theory and Practice in Post-Colonial Literature, by these three important writers is very important. Okay? They believe that Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffin, they believe post-colonialism deals with the effects of the colonization on cultures and societies of colonized one. They focused on hybridization. Hybridization, the term is used to refer to the colonial languages and cultures in which imperialist importations are enforced on native tradition. So friend, here we will see the formation of the colonial and post-colonial subject as subaltern. This is what is they view that the third world country subjects are referred as subaltern. Subaltern, the subordinate, the derogatory or the powerless. The colonial subjects have been constructed as subaltern by European discourse, and it has been internalized automatically by the colonials. The post-colonial critics try to de-establishment of Eurocentric principles in literary and artistic fields. They also wish to expand the literary canon to include colonial and post-colonial writers in it. Who are the significant critics? Edward Said. Please go through all these matter. I'm just giving you the names due to the limitation of time. I'm again and again reminded of it. So you have to refer to this. Edward Said, Leela Gandhi, then Gayatri Chakravarti Spivaks, Can the Subaltern Speak, Homi Bhabha is another important name. These are the books by Bhabha, which are very important. Nation and Narration, the Location of Culture. Okay. And then now let us move towards the last approach of this unit 3. So you have eco-criticism. Eco-criticism, I think we can feel the major problem, the kind of ecocide we are committing nowadays due to the industrialization and the kind of greed we are going towards too. So eco-criticism is the need of the hour. We should be aware of the ecosystem wherein we live. We are surrounded by ecosystem. So friends, we all know that we are living in a polluted, contaminated environment. So now this pandemic period must have been making all of us, all humanity aware how much we are trying to exploit our nature, our external environment. So let us go through this eco-criticism. and I feel that you all must focus on eco-criticism more, right? So we live in a polluted and contaminated world. Mankind is efficiently committing ecocide. We all agree, right? So, and we are making our planet inhospitable for life, for all kinds, not only human beings, but all kinds, other non-human species. So, eco-criticism is a literal response to the most pressing contemporary issues of all, the global environment crisis. So, it is a approach to literary studies. It is an environmental perspective. Okay, we look towards to a literary work from environment perspective. Now, till now we have seen feminist perspective, Marxist perspective, language, structure, and all those perspectives we have seen. But now it is a need. We have to, all of us should awake towards to this particular concept. Okay, so it is an environmental perspective in contemporary literary studies. We have been living in an age of environmental crisis. Literature responds to the contemporary issues and events. Related humanities disciplines like history, philosophy, law, sociology, religion have been grinning since 1970s. So, ecological literary study emerged as a recognizable critical school by 1993. The fundamental premise of the ecological criticism is that human culture is intimately connected to the physical world. Human culture affects the physical world and it is in turn affected by it. Eco-criticism examines human perception of wilderness. They also explore the transformation of human perception of nature in the course of the history. Focus is more on the current environmental issues. Eco-criticism is an interdisciplinary one, like feminism. It borrows from Marxist criticism, feminist criticism. So let us see the origin of this particular theory. The field of environmental literary criticism was planted in 1980s. Okay? And eco-criticism originates in a biosocial context of unrestrained capitalism and excessive exploitation of nature. It intends to show how theoretically informed readings of cultural texts can contribute not only to consciousness raising but also look into the politics of development and construction of nature. It is the analytic practice that shows us various contours of the real world. Eco-criticism focuses on the material context of industrialization, development, pollution, and ecocide while developing a frame of reading. Who are the theorists? I will just name these theorists. You just go through it properly. Sorry. So we have William Ruckert, Raymond Williams is very important name here. Just go through the slide properly. Now we will see ecological approach to literature when it emerged in a postmodern era. It takes into account the contemporary global environmental issues. It believes that literary, visual, and other representations of nature are very much to do with an age, views, and treatment of nature. It intends to analyze the effect of such discourse on culture. Okay, so these are the writers of 20th century: Aldo Leopold, John Muir, Carson. They suggested different ways of looking towards to the environment. But friends, ironically, eco-criticism as a theory, when it came into existence, do you know? When there was an emergence of activists and the legal cases about the pollution, then only we became aware of eco-criticism. Now, eco-criticism seeks to study, explore, and analyze nature writing text to add to the canon in literary and cultural studies. Okay. So, Glotfelty is an important name, and there are other theorists who are talking about eco-criticism. So, Glotfelty gives three phases like feminism. Here also, what Glotfelty says is that one has to see it aims at eco-criticism aims at the study of nature representation in literature. She tries to look at the images of nature in a literary in literature from the perspective of stereotypes. She tries to look at the stereotypes, for example stereotypes of literature like savage wilderness, the virgin land, frontiers, arcadian, all sorts of images which have been created like stereotypes in literature of nature, right? She tries to recover of nature. She tries to recover of nature in writing text. Then she analyzes the symbolic construction of species, the discourses that construct the backgrounds to eco-criticism. It goes back to Western environmentalist thought. Okay, so Thomas Hobbes we have who talks about state of nature, and he believes that human community formation constitute comforts and safety, whereas state of nature is a primitive one. John Locke he also suggests that humans must treat the land as their private property so that they could take care of their own private property. So what was the status of ecology in romantic literature? Dear friend, just go through the slide. Yes. So romanticism in literature was a definite reaction. It is a reaction to industrialization. Romantic writers also talked about it. Okay. So the glorification of nature and landscapes in England and European poetry and paintings highlighted the delicate balance between man and the environment. Wordsworth and other writers responded to this green, smoke, and polluted world. Okay, they were against of industrialization. Then we have Rousseau, who argued that the state of nature was the purest based form of human existence. He is one of the first critics of the Enlightenment. He argues against the established notion of progress. He believes that as long as they live in nature, they are quite happy. We could say so. Rousseau believes that the natural was innocent and the civilization was artificial and corrupt. So you can imagine, people already have talked about the balance. One has to have balance between these two. The views of about ecology during 18th, 17th, and 18th century. So during the 18th and 19th century, this civilization was tied up with two other movements: colonialism and capitalism. Okay? Both regarded nature as something to be exploited by humans. Okay? So nature was exploited at its extent by us, that is by human beings. Colonizers assumed natives in the colonies as a part of nature, savage, primitive, meant to be improved by European influence. J.S. Mill marks a departure from Enlightenment thought. In his essay Nature, he argues that all human actions are irrational because they try to alter or change the course of nature. Then we have Mill. In 20th century, there are writers who are talking about ecosystem and ecology. Okay. So we have Habermas. He believes that the rise of the environmentalist movement constitutes a new social movement. We have Anthony Giddens. They talk about deep ecology. It is a new concept in ecosystem or eco-criticism. Please go through deep ecology also. Deep ecology believes in the fundamental interconnectedness of all life forms and natural features. It believes that anthropocentric thinking has alienated humans from their natural environment, and it is true. And that is why we are getting affected by the kind of consequences we are going through. It is a result or an impact of it. So deep ecology proposes a respect not only for all life forms but also towards the landscape, such as rivers, mountains. Okay. Arminius is the name, which is important here. His ideas are as follows. He says that human life forms are an integral part of the earth. We must expand to include more of the others, that is non-human species. There has been an emotional relation with response to nature and not merely rational or the intellectual one. We are going even beyond rationalism. Both human and non-human life forms have intrinsic values. The value of non-human life is not dependent upon the usefulness of these lives, forms for humans. Ecosystem in nature can only tolerate a certain level of human activity or interference. We all have forgotten this fact somewhere, and so the kind of problems we are going through is because of this. The emphasis should be on appreciating the quality of life. So friends, I think we all have to focus on ecosystem. We all have to see that there has to be a balance between these, between our ecology, the kind of ecosystem we are in, and Marxist theorists also, they believe on ecosystem, and so they said that nature has become a commodity with the capitalist production. Nature is therefore internal to capitalist mechanism as a source of profit. Okay, they look at nature as source of profit, capitalist. That's what Marxists are trying to say. So, friends, you might have observed that since ages, all of us are talking about, all of our literary writers, literarians are talking about balance between ecosystem. But yet, so ethics are implicated in the way we talk about the world, the way we perceive it. So we must have the courage to learn the language of nature, to reanimate nature. Our language should be free from an obsession with human preeminence. We should follow the path of ontological humility and egalitarianism. Okay? So this is what is unit 3, and now unit 4, practical criticism. Here I have not given any slide, but I would suggest you that on the basis of your reading, your understanding of poem, you have to find out the answers for appreciation. Like you can talk about, let us say, the significance of title, the kind of figure of speech the poet has used, the theme, intention of the writer of writing, the kind of relation between stanzas or the lines, the hidden forward meaning the poet intends to suggest. So on the basis of it, I'm sure you will be able to manage to write this particular unit 4, uh, practical criticism. Thank you. Yes, now I think I have completed the entire revision of this particular paper. Let me just inform you about this. So there are 4 units in this particular paper. Unit 1, literary movements, which we have seen. You need to focus from the perspective as you are the students. So you are going to write an exam. So from the perspective of examining, you have to see up to what extent you need to write an answer. For example, if 10 mark question comes, you should know up to what length. Of course, it has some quality also. So, including your quality thinking, writing, I would suggest you. If a question comes for a long answer, um, we expect that we would like to see students like this, that you can write 4 to 5 maximum paragraphs. Like first paragraph, let us take an example of this, unit 2 and 3, where you have critical approaches. So very first paragraph, you must mention that why that particular critical approach came into existence. This is first thing you have to mention in your answer, like the kind of background, on which background. So friends, to conclude, I would say that I think I would have done justice while revising this particular paper. I hope you understand at least basic concepts of all these critical approaches. Me as a teacher would like to suggest you a few important points, like when you write your paper during exam, uh, just be careful what you are writing off. You should write, as I told you, it is unlike other papers where you cannot write a summary of Marxism or any particular approach. Okay, you have to use those particular that particular critical language. Okay, so when you write about particular long answer question, that time I think you should write with an introduction where you will tell or you will inform or you will give an impression to your paper assessor that you know why this particular approach came into existence, the need, the significance of that particular approach. Then your second paragraph could be the critics who have contributed to that particular approach. And the third paragraph, you can go like how gradually that approach became popular, or is there any other ism or other approaches who gave a reaction or an opposition to this particular approach. Okay, so this is how you have to mention. And last paragraph, I would suggest you that please do refer to a particular literary text to which you can apply that approach, so that any paper examiner can get an impression that yes, the student knows why this particular approach came in existence, who are the contributors, and what kind of an opposition or reaction or extension of that approach came into existence gradually, and who are the writers who are practicing this. Okay, and you have critical ability to apply that particular ism to a particular text. That is what is the whole intention of literary criticism. Literary criticism paper makes you able to apply the critical mind to literary work. So friends, initially in the beginning itself, I said that I will keep my lecture till 40 to 45 minutes. But sorry, I couldn't keep my commitment as it has gone a little longer. But since this is criticism paper, I could not skip any other important matter. Of course, though I have not yet gone into the detail of the particular the paper, you all have to understand this is just a revision lecture. So at the end, I would like to thank you all for listening my online video lecture. And at last, I would like to thank Dr. Sudhir Nikam sir for giving me this opportunity. I also wish to thank Sudhir sir's department colleague, Ms. Amrita Zata, who really helped me as and when needed. Thank you very much. Me as a teacher, I wish you all the best, my dear students, for scoring high in this particular paper. Please do do remain safe at home and happy. Thank you.